Elon Musk. Is there anything the guy can't do? He immigrated from Africa to America in the early 90s. Most of us know of his successes at Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter/X, and others, but that's present day. What was he doing from the 90s until now? His first success was selling an online city guide to Compaq for over 300 million. He also was a co-founder of an entity that eventually became known as PayPal. Now, when you look at the man who is, one of the richest men in the world, I think it's fair to ask, would he have been as successful if he stayed in South Africa? I think many people would say no. But why is that? Well, many people view America as the land of opportunity. Again, why is that? Well, what I think Elon might say, and what I think is one of the dominant features of his philosophies or his approach or whatever, is that he is a champion of the free markets. In this video, I will talk about 5 reasons why I think Elon is a champion of a free market economy, and also what you can learn from that and how you can potentially apply that to your own business. The first example that I would like to talk about is the Tesla plant in Alameda, California. Let me give you the high level of what happened here. It was during COVID, and everyone recalls there were federal restrictions regarding going back to work. In some instances, there were state restrictions that either reinforced the federal restrictions or guidelines, or added new ones or slight tweaks or whatever. And then in many instances, there were also city or even county guidelines that companies had to contend with. In the case of Tesla in Alameda, there was a workforce that wanted to go back. My perspective is that, Elon and the other folks, the other management at Tesla were trying to create a safe environment. They were able to show that they were adhering to the federal restrictions or requirements or whatever, as well as the state. However, the city restrictions of Alameda were essentially the lone stumbling block preventing the Tesla workers from going back to work at that plant. Now, the point here is that it wasn't as if Elon was purely being a cowboy and saying, F the world, I'm going to do whatever I want. I mean, I really feel like, not just he, but the company was doing a lot of the right things there. I mean, they adhered to the federal requirements and the state requirements. It's just the city requirements that were tripping them up. And so it's a good example of, here's a company that has a workforce that is trying to do everything they can to abide by the letter of the law, and they're still preventing them from operating. I can share Elon's and everyone else's at Tesla's frustration that they weren't able to go back to work because they were trying to do everything they could, except the city government, the lowest rung on the ladder, if you will, was standing in their way. Now, ultimately, through diplomacy or whatever you want to call it, in working with the city, they did get the ability to go back to work, but there were some potential fireworks. I mean, at one point, Elon said that they're going back to work regardless of what the city says, and that he hopes that if people get arrested, he's the only one. So it was certainly a situation that had some drama, but it didn't rise to the level of Elon or anyone else at Tesla getting carted away in handcuffs. As much fun as is to talk about COVID restrictions and how wonderful that period of our lives was, this next example is one that I really find very interesting because it flips a business model, if you will, on its head, and that is the Tesla distribution model. As you know, most cars are sold in dealerships. That's the expected and accepted way to sell a car for decades. Well, here comes upstart Tesla, and they decide they want to sell cars their own way by foregoing dealerships. Now, some people are okay with that, but obviously the dealers didn't love that, and some of the states didn't love that at all. I think the primary example here is New Jersey. I remember reading for a time that you weren't able to buy a car in New Jersey because of the restrictions around or requirement to sell cars in dealerships. However, that wasn't going to work for Tesla for whatever reason. I don't know the exact reasons why that wasn't going to work for Tesla, but it's a model that I think has made a lot of sense and has allowed Tesla to be much more nimble and require a lot less investment in inventory because they don't have hundreds or thousands or however many dealerships around the country with countless vehicles on the lots. They have much smaller footprints with very limited cars. I think I've been to one Tesla showroom that had maybe 2 or 3 cars. You get in one, you pick from just a few options, and that's that. I know there are people that are complete Tesla addicts or fanboys or whatever, and people that are not so in love with Tesla, but for the people that love Tesla, it's an amazing buying experience, as well as it's somewhat refreshing from many people's perspective not to have that smorgasbord of various options that you try and go in and buy a car for 30 grand or whatever, and you option it to a certain level. Now it's 60 or 80 grand. Doesn't necessarily relate to the distribution model, but I think it points to one of the strategies of Tesla, which is to be more streamlined and more nimble, which I think has been a great benefit for the company. Another Tesla example is the fact that Tesla currently doesn't have any unions. Throughout history, especially within the past probably 20, 30, 40 years, everyone knows about unions. Everyone knows about the challenge that the big 3 Detroit automakers have had in working with unions. One aspect of being a free market is not having the regulation that allows for unions and whatnot. Though the strikes are limited at present, there are 25,000 workers on strike. Now, I realize that's just a small percentage in terms of the overall workforce, but that's a meaningful chunk. And the UAW was strategic in what workers they're wanting to go on strike, because even though that's a small percentage, those workers aren't able to produce key components within the vehicle. And so because of that, it's going to have a real impact on total vehicle output. The next example I'd like to talk about are the changes that Elon implemented at Twitter/X. He was a firm proponent of enforcing or allowing free speech on the platform. Now that required some work because, one of the key stumbling blocks for the transaction was that, he got in there, he did the analysis and realized that the number of fake accounts on the platform, were far higher than anyone believed. And so, his belief is that we don't want fake accounts to have, unlimited, access or promotion or whatever. However, he does want verified users to be able to share their own views. And, I think a lot of people respect that. I think a lot of people don't respect it because they view that, he's, more on the right than the left. And so, the folks on the left don't like that, or maybe the folks on the right wish he was, farther right or whatever. But the key point here is that free speech, no moderation, etc., again, is consistent with him being a champion of a free market. The final example is about SpaceX. Now, SpaceX is less about changing a business model or, having the views of a free market infiltrate the company, the culture, etc., etc. Instead, I think the key point here is how efficient a company operating in a free market can be as compared to a company or an entity, if you will, that is sponsored by the state. I mean, you look at the time it took and the dollars it took for SpaceX to put a rocket in space and compare that to NASA. And I don't even want to share the numbers because I don't think it'll make you sick, but it's really mind-boggling to see how efficient a free market enterprise can do something whenever there isn't the safety net of an endless or seemingly endless budget from the US government. It's why a free market economy is almost anathema to, a communist society where all the assets are owned by the state. This entity is able to survive, and not just survive, but thrive because it's operating in a free market, which is the exact opposite, a market in which the assets are controlled or run by the state.
I think the United States is more open to new ideas than any country in the world, and I think it's becomes somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that because the United States was open to new ideas, it attracted people from around the world who had new ideas.
There's no question that Elon is pro-America. He has even said that he thinks he's nauseating rightly so. However, that begs the question, if Elon's success is because of the way that America is set up, because it's a free market economy, what does the future look like? Are we trending towards continued free market economics, or are we trending toward a situation in which many of the components of a free market are being eroded? Let me know in the comments, or feel free to email me at the email address below. Now, there are a lot of things that I think that Elon and I would see eye to eye on, but there are a lot of things that, we are very different. Even though I respect the fact that he slept on the factory floor, and to some degree I respect that he works 7 days a week, pretty much every day of the year. I think I heard him say that there's only 2 or 3 days out of the year where he doesn't work a very meaningful amount. If that works for him, if that allows for him to have a happy life or whatever, that's great. I want to spend more time with my kids. I want to spend more time with my family, and I'm not going to let work get in that way. Is that right? No, it's not right. It's just how I choose to live my life. Another example, if somebody calls one of the companies that we own a dumpster fire, it's not my personality to respond to that with a fire emoji. That's what Elon did whenever somebody said that Twitter was a dumpster fire. Again, not saying right or wrong, it's just I'm a pretty boring guy, and for me to respond with a fire emoji, that would be pretty out of character. So even with all the eccentricities, if you will, of his personality, again, I think where one of the elements where we will always see eye to eye is that, like myself, Elon is a champion of the free markets. As always, please like and subscribe. Thanks.